joining me this early in the morning. If you're going to join me, 7 a.m. Central Time. My apologies to our Razorback fans on the left coast. If they want to jump in here, be my guest. But something a little bit different. I'm calling this my breakfast buffet, my Hoop Hogs, buffet for breakfast. Brought to you by HogvilleNet, YouTube Live, Hogville.net. Also want to thank my sponsors right off the top because we're going to get into a lot today. We're going to talk about the transfer portal. We're going to talk about the coaching carousel. We're going to talk about in-state players leaving the program into the portal, players that are in-state at other schools that Arkansas is talking to already that are in the portal. I think that's an interesting dynamic because of how important the state has been. The recruiting in-state has been over the years, including the Eric Musselman era at Arkansas. So we're going to get into all that after I thank my sponsors. I want to do that now. Jose's Bar and Grill in Town. I did a lot of my pre-games live there. Wasn't the kind of season that Razorback fans had hoped for. I understand that. So, considering how tough that was for everybody, it was a lot of fun for me to be able to do pre-games. They're on-site, on location at Jose's Bar and Grill in Town. Once again, thank owner Doug Allen, his family, and his staff. Amazing group of people. And hopefully we'll get to do some more of that stuff moving forward. So I want to get another one of my newest sponsors that I really want to get to, and I'm excited to talk about, Autograph. It's an app platform that you can download on your phone. They've already Autograph has brought on a lot of national media and athlete talent to sort of promote this free site, this free app for everybody. And it's basically a portal to your favorite local college teams. You set up your account, everything's free. I've done mine. And then you're able to access a lot of creative content for each, like for Arkansas, for example. You select Arkansas, you make that as your default, where your eyes want to be on information coming in. It's got live tracking on score updates for your favorite teams. You can look at podcasts. You can go directly to the websites for each one of your favorite content providers. And so Hogville's a part of that. Hogville, as far as I know, is the only one that has 100% free content. That's one of the available options. I could be wrong about that, but I know that it is. But it's Autograph. Download the app. If you go to the top of my Twitter page or X, I've got an announcement for Autograph pinned there. It's got a link to the site if you want to go that route, and use the promo code. Use my promo code ARHS24. That's ARHS24 is the promo code. But I would download Autograph. I've done it, and it's really handy because you can jump around, and really it's kind of one site to get everywhere. All right, so now we're going to move along, and we're going to talk more. I'm going to adjust this maybe just a little bit. There we go. I'm going to adjust it just a little bit there. Going to start moving into the sort of an overarching look at where Arkansas Razorback basketball is right now when we start talking about transfer portal recruiting, because this is a different kind of season for under Eric Musselman going into the spring. We know he's always made a focus of the transfer portal before each of his 5 seasons at Arkansas. I think the difference this time around, obviously, is how the team finished. Even though he turns over a great number of the roster as it is, despite what success the team or the programs had getting to Elite Eights back-to-back years, and then a Sweet 16 last year, there is a major overhaul, but it always seems like he continues to recruit the same way, but just makes tweaks on things he thinks is needed to advance the program. This is a little bit different because even though there'll be another big overhaul and a lot of portal players coming out, there's also this different vibe within the program coming off a losing season. We talked about how historically bad it was, but I think it's important to keep an eye on how Musselman approaches this, because one thought is, does he really try to drill down and get back to the identity of what his successful teams have been at Arkansas and even Nevada before that, and so a lot of attention to defense. Remember, back-to-back Elite Eight, Sweet 16. If you look at KenPom, good to see you too. Good morning. Thank you for the comment. If you look at the KenPom ratings, Arkansas finished 134th in defensive rating this year. Finished outside the top 100 in KenPom's overall rankings. Offense was in the low 100s, technically better than the defense for once, but the defense, you're talking about ranked 10th final ranking, 11th, and then 17th last year. So 3 consecutive seasons in the top 20. If you look at the teams still alive in the NCAA tournament, a lot of the top tier teams obviously are strong defensively, would rate in that top 20. If you look at it historically, teams that win the national championship, you kind of reflect it back to Ken Palm. There's usually a balance of somewhere in the top 20 to 25 defensively and at least top 40 offensively. So defensively is where Arkansas has been really good under Musselman in the previous season. Not so much there. So I start thinking about the portal recruiting, and I start thinking about how does Arkansas get back to those roots? How does Musselman dive in? Because I think last year's portal haul, which was basically mostly backcourt players, obviously early on in early April, about a 2 week window, 5 guys they brought out, perimeter guys, backcourt guys. And I think there was some slippage in terms of identifying players that are going to take care of the identity first. Arkansas had been poor at the free throw line the season before in terms of efficiency on the Sweet 16 team last year. Not a good 3-point shooting team, and that had been prevalent for a couple of seasons leading up to this last recruiting cycle. And so I think Musselman really put his attention on getting better offensively in some ways. And Arkansas really, again, in a 2 week span, just kind of layered on backcourt players there. Individually good, but for the formula that had been working for Arkansas, I think Musselman really struggled to rein everything in, get players to buy in, pay attention to detail. And a lot of that stuff when you're talking about defense, because you can't just always be proactive defensively, you've got to be a lot reactive. So communication's important, getting guys locked in, dialed in, and drilling down on the stuff that matters. That was always a problem, I thought, for this team, even though there were stretches where some matchups favored Arkansas. The other thing was that wasn't a very physically tough on the front line or the backcourt. You could say there were other areas that Arkansas wasn't tough in, but certain physically not. So I do look for Musselman to kind of focus on some of those areas, maybe try to get bigger in some positions or bulkier. And some of the names, one of the things he did last year also when he got in the portal was really go after experience. Remember, the Sweet 16 team, 3 one-and-dones, 3 5-stars, but that group had a bunch of freshmen, 6. And so he's dialed that down. If you look at the last 2 recruiting cycles since that one, at the high school part of it, only 2 players out of the 23 class, and one of those is already in the transfer portal, and Leighton Blocker, we're going to talk about some of that stuff later. And then 2 in this year's class. You've got a combo forward, 6'8", Jalen Shelley, Isaiah Elohim, a 6'4", 6'5" wing. So these are players that will come in as true freshmen. I don't know how much they'll play. Again, since the 3 5-stars that have moved on and some players before them, Musselman's trending more and more away from playing the younger players. He's always had, a proclivity not to, except for the guys that are projected right away. But his last 2 classes haven't had those kind of one-and-done type projections. And you see it in the playing time in this last class. We'll see about this next one. But, and then you've also got to consider when you're in this portal, guys that are still left. You've had 5 go into the portal. You've got plenty of players that ran out of eligibility. And you've got holes in both the backcourt and the front court. The names that still remain right now, we're waiting on announcements. Trevor Brazile on the front line. Let's see if he tests the NBA draft waters. I think he will, at minimum. We'll see if he's a guy that has any plans on coming back to college or leaving the door cracked for that, or strongly considering, returning to the Hogs. We'll find out more about that when he makes his announcement. I'm hearing different things on that, but I think the consensus that I'm getting is that he'll at least at minimum test the waters. I think he should. A guy that was projected coming into the season by some as a Friends lottery pick. I know some of the scouts and folks that attended Arkansas's Pro Day way back in October when Brazile basically made his debut after being out nearly a year with, rehabbing the knee. That he was maybe going to be a guy, in line for some lottery projections. So I think we're far away from that right now. And then you look at Bay Fall, who basically, of the 2 freshmen, didn't see the court very much. Leighton Blocker saw more playing time. Bay Fall barely any. He and Denaje Harris, the senior forward, who's now in the portal, we're at the bottom. When you looked at 14 players effectively that were, scholarship players, we know Keon Minifield Jr. technically wasn't. He's in the portal and moving on. But Bay Fall didn't see a lot of run. 6'11", big man. McDonald's All-American the year before. And so we'll see what his decision is. Does he remain in Arkansas? And then you've got Tremont Mark and Caleb Battle. So we know what those guys did. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because I really have already gone 10 minutes deep, and I haven't even started talking about the present, but I wanted to set it up with what are some of the obstacles, what are some of the things from a global look that Eric Musselman and his staff are considering, not only steps back that the program took a season ago, but some of the dynamics that fed into that, which will include decisions made in portal recruiting, obviously, because again, they've really skinnied down on the high school part of it. I think you have to have a good balance. I'm not saying that you have to have the same amount of high school players each year and the same amount of portal guys, but I do think you need a blend of talent from the high school levels, guys that you can ride with, and Musselman's done that. He's had some success doing it. I don't think it's been a focal point as much of late as the portal has, and it's going to be really incumbent based on a small class of two top 100 four-star rated players coming in that Musselman and his staff really, you know, turn over some gems that maybe they didn't find a year ago at this time. And so this is what the staff is up against. And I'm already impressed with the work that this group is putting in as far as what Eric Musselman's known for is the portal, right? He's known for it. It's a big part of what makes him a great coach. And I think when you look at the effort going into this next recruiting cycle, it reminds me of what they do every year. So there's been a lot of stuff swirling around. We're going to get to that at the end. I'm going to focus on the positives and the work that this staff is doing. I think it would be unfair to jump into coaching carousel talk and some of the other stuff first. I really believe, based on the body of work and the things that are going on and continue to go on, let's look at that first and give credit where credit's due, because I'm impressed with some of the names I'm saying. We don't have all the names. We've got a few. I'm going to drop a couple today that haven't been talked a lot about. One of them I haven't seen anywhere associated with Arkansas, so we're going to get to that. But the first name is one has a planned visit coming up early in the week or midweek. We'll see how it plays out. Could be early this week, maybe by tomorrow or midweek. But Josh Cohen, it's a name familiar to me because Arkansas recruited him out of the portal a year ago. Some of these names are guys that Arkansas was looking at in the portal a year ago. He's one of them. 6'10", 220, played last season at UMass after being for 4 years at St. Francis. He does have a COVID fifth year. He also had a hardship due to, I think, an injury early in his career at St. Francis in Pennsylvania. But he's, coming out of UMass. I'm going to run through his stats real quick, and then I'm going to talk about what I've seen out of him just watching him play. But 6'10", 220, I mentioned that. 15.9 points, 6.8 rebounds, 1.7 assists. He shoots over 54% from the field. He'll take a three. He averages 1 3-point attempt per game, shooting 34.4%, and just under 70%, 69.6% from the free throw line, playing roughly 29 minutes a game. His first team All-Atlantic 10 last year in his lone season at UMass. He's in the portal. He's got some visits lined up. Arkansas is the first one out of the gates. Again, I mentioned that could start, early week, maybe by tomorrow, maybe midweek. But after that, he's got he's planning to visit Notre Dame and Xavier, possibly Penn State. Now, this is based on some of these other. I've been able to confirm his upcoming visit with Arkansas, but some of these other names I'm mentioning were reported elsewhere. A national reporter a few days ago. But here's a guy, when I look at his game, this is not a typical SEC type of player by any stretch when you look talking about an interior player. He's a plotter. He's not a guy that's playing above the rim, and he's not a guy that's, getting from end to end, with a burst. He's just not that kind of a guy. And really, I'm an old school guy. I like to talk about old school players sometimes. And he's a very poor man's Kevin McHale. A lot of up and under moves, a lot of craft, old school basketball around the basket. He does a really good job of setting his frame as an anchor, feeling contact, and then picking and choosing directions off of that, using his pivot foot. He'll turn baseline or he'll turn into the paint. He's not rising over anybody to finish. He's just getting finishing angles, using his big frame for leverage. He's a guy that, when I look at him, I mean, he can play the low post. He can play out of the low post. You can put him in the mid and high post because he'll make decisions with the ball. He'll make some good passes out of that. Veteran guy. I mean, this would be a guy that would be in year 6 effectively at the college level. So we know Musselman, again, we talk about it. He likes players with experience, guys coming in, that know how to play. But this guy has started his last 62 games in Division I. All 31 games this last year at UMass. All 31 games the year before at St. Francis, PA, when he initially then after that year came into the portal in Arkansas, was recruiting him. So here we go again. And you don't bring players onto campus unless you're serious about those players and adding them to your roster. Arkansas is getting the first visit here. This is a guy, when I look at him, value wise, and what I really think, especially when you get into some of the better teams, you're going to play more athletic teams, especially in the SEC. I do wonder how he'll translate. A lot of that would be also the pieces you put around him and what's available around him to complement him. Obviously, that's with any player, but as someone like this guy, I'm not sure what kind of role he would realistically have, peeling back on some of the teams Eric Musselman's had. And again, it's going to depend on what Arkansas is able to build around him. I mentioned, big question marks around Brazil. And he's a guy that we all thought would probably be off to the pros. We'll see what he does. But with Mekhi Mitchell gone, Jalen Graham gone, Chandler Lawson in his 1 year at Arkansas had an interesting role. But great reach, not a high riser either. Similar to Cohen, he wasn't an above the rim player, except that he had a 7'7" wingspan, so he could dunk, block shots, and sometimes it felt like he was playing a little bit above the rim, but he really wasn't. But he was a guy, when you really looked at his role, he got a lot of starts. He started more than any frontline guy probably this season, because Brazil missed a lot of games, and so it was close anyway between those two. But Lawson was a guy that even in the starting lineup did not necessarily, in many games, maybe most games, didn't play a ton of minutes. So Cohen is a guy, when I look at him, as a rotation piece, potentially playing off the bench in some kind of a role, or if you plugged him into some starting lineup, he might have a role similar to a Chandler Lawson, where you kind of pay attention to the matchup, how effective is he, the footwork, although it's good, it's slow. And again, there's not a lot of lift, so there are things that concern me in terms of Arkansas being poor defensively coming out of last year. I don't know that this guy checks a box there for you either. And I think, again, there's going to be a lot of attention to that. So I don't want to be negative about this guy, because some of the positives, I mean, again, I've talked about his finishing angles, but one of the he did have double-figure scoring games this year. I just kind of briefly looked at some of the stuff he did, but double-figure scoring games, against West Virginia, Georgia Tech, so a couple of high majors there that UMass competed against. Dayton, a good team at the mid-major level, so he did have some good games, and certainly when you're first team All Atlantic 10, that's a good mid-major conference, and that's he's done strong work there. So I don't want to underplay what he's done. I'm trying to kind of project what he'll be. All right, so we've spent a lot of time on that. That's the one name that we know. Look, the portal's going to start intensifying even more, because you've gotten out of the first weekend now of the NCAA tournament. Weekend one is over. And so here we're going to flow into Monday, and you're going to see a lot more names getting in the portal. You have half of you had 68 teams in, only 32 teams left. Simple, quick math, 36 teams that are now done. Their seasons are wrapped up, and players are going to be getting in the portal. And I'm going to jump to one of the local names who plays out of state, who would fit into the description I just gave, and we'll see if he gets in the portal. I talked about him on Pig Trail Nation a little bit yesterday. I'm going to get into some of those names a little later on, because I want to get through this battery of other players first. So we started with Josh Cohen. We'll see how the visit goes. We'll see if Arkansas is able to get a commitment out of him. Again, you don't bring players in unless you're looking for a commitment. And anytime you can get, a big body with a pulse, and a guy that can do a few things like this guy can. I talked about some of his limitations, but he's also a very savvy guy. We'll see if Arkansas can land and see if he's, a guy that actually ends up taking the other visits. In Penn State, if he ends up, that's not scheduled this week from what the national reporting is, but it's for his home state school, obviously, there in the Big Ten. Okay, so we're going to move on to a couple of names. One of the biggest names out there, top 5 guy, Arkansas's in on. It's a little more than that. I did talk about this on Pig Trail Nation. We tape those early in the afternoon on Sundays, and then they get released a little later. But I did talk about this yesterday. Clifford Omarui, 6'11" center, 240 pounds out of Rutgers. Now, this is not a high-flying guy either, really, but man, he's got what looks to me like not only a strong, sturdy frame, that part's obvious, but he's long. He's got a plus wingspan. He can be a space eater when he spreads out and kind of, really sits down around the basket. But he's a guy that, he's not a volume scorer, but a big time rim protector. And again, a guy that can just kind of throw his body around and create problems for teams matching up with him, especially what I noticed in pick and roll and two-man game out high. Once he gets his wheels turning downhill, you have to stay attached to him. You have to tag him, because if you don't and you give him space to catch and roll, he's hard to deal with because of his frame, and he will get to the rim. He's not an explosive guy, but he's good. He's good getting around it. But 10.5 points this past season, 8.3 rebounds, nearly 3 blocks per game, 2.9, 51% shooting from the field, only 61% from the free throw line. But playing over 26 minutes per game, so his minutes went down actually. 4 years at Rutgers, so like Cohen, he's got 1 more year of eligibility. The season before that, he averaged 2 years ago 13.2 points, 9.6 rebounds, almost a double average. But his blocks and more minutes, his blocks actually were closer to 2.1. Past season, he improved there as a rim protector. He's a oh, this is something that was really important to me. I'm trying to read my notes here with my glasses off. I mentioned the 8.3 rebounds, so he's at over 2.5 offensive rebounds per game. So he's a guy at both ends on the glass that can factor in. We know Arkansas really lacked toughness, physicality on its own offensive glass, and then getting defensive rebounds and closing out defensive possessions when they had good defensive possessions last year. And he's the kind of guy that helps you fix that at both ends of the floor, some of that. And so this is a player, again, a top 5 in the country right now when you look at the portal. Some people have him at the top of the board, but he's at minimum top 5, probably consensus. But again, 6'11", 240. He's a guy that I wouldn't necessarily you would think that Arkansas has got an in for, right? But the reason I bring him up is because with over 40 initial contacts that the Razorbacks coaching staff has made, there's a group of players they've gone further with. And when I say further, some kind of virtual meetings, whether it's FaceTime, Zoom, ways to get further along. And so when your entire staff is communicating with a player and you're starting to get some of those face-to-face things, even if it's not a visit yet or in person, Arkansas's coaching staff, by the way, has fanned out. I'll talk a little bit about that for some in-person meetings. But Arkansas's moved along a little bit with Omarui, and we'll see where it goes. I'm not projecting that this guy ends up at Arkansas, but it is interesting because Arkansas didn't just do the cursory reach out and contact early thinking, well, we don't have a shot. Eric Musselman really doesn't recruit that way. They do cast a wide net, and they're not afraid to go after what's considered big game, whether the high school or portal levels. And so Omarui is one of those guys that if you got him, that's kind of what, if you want to give a star ranking to portal guys, this would be one that's up there in that 5-star conversation potentially. And again, more portal players are going to come out. That'll shuffle the deck a little bit in terms of how players are valued by some of the national recruiting folks. I have my own opinions watching college basketball and watching some of these guys, but Omarui is interesting. All right, I'm going to throw in a name that I haven't seen associated with Arkansas yet. I haven't seen it on Twitter. I haven't seen it in other spaces. There are some social media platforms that I don't have memberships to, that I don't read. I don't get back channel information on. So I don't know if this name, if some of the fans have heard it in terms of being related to Arkansas. If you're a college fan, you might have heard of this guy. This is a player that actually hurt Arkansas 3 seasons ago in the 21-22 season. Everybody remembers Bebe Iliola, the former Hog that had the double-double at North Little Rock when Hofstra beat Arkansas 89-81. But I wonder if you remember this guy, because I really like this player, and so does the Razorbacks coaching staff. Darlin Stone DeBar, 6'8", 211, 6'8" wing. This is a guy out of Hofstra. I mentioned that. But against the Hogs in that win 2 years ago, 11 points, 5 rebounds, 5 steals, 2 assists in that big win. But I really, really like, 6'8" wing. This guy's versatile. Go watch the tape on this guy. There's a little bit, I throw out player comparisons. This guy's in the NBA now, was a one and done at Duke. So he's not on that level of talent necessarily, but he reminds me a little bit of RJ Barrett with a shot from distance because he's got that big physical frame. He's got guard skills and he's got craft using that big frame and playing some bully ball. He's athletic, but he's got a plus wingspan also. He's got 1 season left of eligibility. Another guy that's, been in the, he started out originally, by the way, at Iowa State and then transferred to Hofstra where he's played the last 3 seasons. But one more to go, 17.8 points per game, 6.8 rebounds, 1.4 assists, 1.2 steals, nearly 54% field goal shooting, 53.9. But here's what I love about this guy: 40% from three, 6'8", big, strong guy, 40% from three last year, 39.9%. And then he's a respectable free throw shooter, 73.4%. You take a guy like this in a heartbeat. I really like his versatility. Back against Duke, we know Arkansas beat Duke. By the way, Duke's in the Sweet 16. Arkansas's best win of the year. It's kind of backed up by the fact that Duke, Duke has been ranked top 10, top 15 most of the year. I figured the Blue Devils would be a 3 or 4 seed. They did come in as a 4. And so, but this is a guy that when Hofstra played Duke back in December, 24 points, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a steal in a loss. It was a loss to Duke, at Duke. But another team, out of the Big East, St. John's, that was on the bubble. When Hofstra played St. John's, that was a close game. It was a closer game, a 5-point loss, but 23 points, 5 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals, and assists. So when I watch his activity, when I watch his sort of a fearlessness in the way that he plays, and a lot of confidence in his game. Again, I compare him a little bit to R.J. Barrett. There's some other stuff. You look at Kobe Brown. I might make some more comparisons using him at Missouri last year, who's, basically, I think, got a 2-way deal and may end up getting a contract better than that at the NBA level, but a very versatile guy. I don't know that DeBar has all of the court savvy as a handler and a facilitator, some stuff that Brown could do, but boy, he checks a lot of boxes on a big frame where you watch him and the way they use him. You can post him up. He can go to work because of that size. He can play on the perimeter. I mentioned the 40% 3-point shooting. And then, he's just a guy that if you get him in transition, he's hard to deal with because of the size and then his skill level. He's just a good player. So Darlin Stone, I know that's DarlinStone, DeBar, Dubar. And look, Arkansas is beyond the initial contact with him. This is another guy that's, a virtual meeting with Arkansas staffers. And so keep an eye on that. Home is Charlotte, North Carolina. Now look, Arkansas's coaching staff has fanned out in the Southeast, some of the states of the Southeast, and ACC footprint in the last few days. Would not surprise me at all if DeBar is a guy that's, not saying he was back home for spring break. I don't know the answer to that. But if he is, that might have been a destination place for Arkansas's coaching staff. But Arkansas's moved along with him. So again, I haven't reported this yet via Twitter or some of these other places. We'll see. At some point, if someone does in terms of doing it that way, I may go ahead and do it now that I've talked about it here. And so those are kind of the 3 names off the top I wanted to start with. I'm going to segment some of this out in terms of players Arkansas is looking at. Because the next 3 are guys I've seen in person. I've seen in person playing at Bud Walton Arena in the non-conference part of the schedule. These are guys that I have thought about for a while after watching them. If these guys get in the portal, at some point, you got to think Arkansas, because Eric Musselman has a long history, we know this, of targeting players that he's matched up against. That goes back to Nevada. And when he got to Arkansas, initially, players he competed against at Nevada, even some of his assistant coaches at Arkansas, the Hogs, guys like J.D. Note and Bebe, coming out of Stetson, playing for one of the original assistant coach staff members, Corey Williams. And Corey Williams' Stetson team going up against Note's college team prior to coming to Arkansas. So Musselman identified Jalen Tate, who didn't actually play against the Hogs when Western Kentucky faced the Razorbacks in year 1, but he pulled him out of the portal as a guy, out of Northern Kentucky, as a guy that was coveted. So you look at, Justin Smith at Indiana had competed against Arkansas against 2 staffs, including Mike Anderson and Eric Musselman. Musselman went and got him in that first. So he continually identifies players that he's competed against as a coach. And I see 3 here that really jump out at me. I'm in love with a couple of these guys, and these guys would be like peas and carrots, peanut butter and jelly, or peanut butter and chocolate, however you want to go with it. These 2 guys, and there's another one in here I like too, and I think he'd work very, very well. But these 2 guys, Mikael Brown-Jones and J.P. Pegues, these are forward and guard. These two guys, they weren't teammates, and I'm going to break it down where they played and what they did. But these two guys really, I love both of their games. From the mid-major level, I think they translate to the high major level. I think the basketball IQ and understanding, they both understand what they are, who they are, and how to plug in and play with others. They both have had success, winning success at their schools. We know North Carolina Greensboro pulled off the big upset against Arkansas this year on the road. Mikael Brown-Jones got in foul trouble early in that game. 6'8" forward, another sturdy guy, a guy with a season left of eligibility. So you see the trend. Last year, Musselman tabs a bunch of guys with a lot of experience. That didn't work out. I think that's a good plan. I think experience is a good plan, but you want more than just the experience. What kind of experience was it? And Mikael Brown-Jones checks a ton of boxes. Ton of boxes. 6'8" forward, North Carolina Greensboro, got in foul trouble, finished with 17 points. Big second half for him in that upset win. 17 points, 2 rebounds. He didn't have a big rebounding game. 1 assist, 78-72 win at Arkansas. Greensboro controlled most of that game, had double-digit leads. He was a big part of it. But he averaged 18.9 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 54% field goal shooting on the season, 43.1% from three. Look, when you watch Mikael Brown-Jones, and I've seen him play, but just in person against the Hogs frontliners, just took everybody to school. He didn't hesitate when the ball was thrown to him. They pulled him away from the low post, a little bit shallow wing, or they'd sit him down on the baseline. He'd curl up, move up, and as soon as he caught the ball, knowing that Arkansas's got kind of soft frontline guys trying to defend, he didn't give him a chance to calculate what he was going to do. He quickly went into his move, whether it was a drop step or just a hard drive, and he got into bodies and he created it. He's not a high flying guy, but man, he's a crafty player and he knows how to attack. But he is great. He is great, in my opinion, in two-man game and high pick and roll because he'll pop. And when you see big men with high three-point shooting percentages like this, you got to understand, most all of the time they're getting it out of two-man game and making defenders pick and choose, getting them caught up. And do I switch? Do I stay? Do I go under? Do I go over? And he's exceptional timing his release off the pick and getting to spots. When you see big men knocking down threes at high percentages, it's almost always above the break. It might be right out front up top. It could be to the left or the right, but it's almost always above the break. But he knows how to play that game. And what happens is, depending upon how defenders try to deal with that, he's quick enough and smart enough and skilled enough to put it on the deck and beat you that way. And he's a guy that he's also, you talk about finishing angles, he's got them all figured out. There's a little bit of Corliss Williamson in there and the way that he deals around the rim and around the basket and finds ways to finish using his frame. 6'8", strong, big, taller than Corliss, but not as bulky as what Corliss was at Arkansas, but there are some similarities in how he approaches some things. When I look at the way he plays on the perimeter, there's an undersized Bobby Portis in there. Bobby Portis was probably the best all-around big man scorer when you start talking about three levels that Arkansas's had in a while. And there's been some really good players, Daniel Gafford, Jalen Williams, other types of play from those guys. But you talk about the ability to really be a threat on offense. This guy, to me, even coming from the mid-major level, might bring more of a bag than anybody since Portis. Not the same, again, Portis 6'10", 6'11", this guy's 6'8". They're not exactly the same. I'm just saying, just comparing some of the stuff they can do offensively. But I love it because even when you can roll him off the pick and he's going to be devastating. Or you can pop him and he's going to be devastating. And so I really like this guy. He is a guy, we look at the average 7.5 rebounds per game. Some of his better games this year scoring, I noticed sometimes his rebounds weren't always there. But he got his average is what it is. And so, over a full season, 7.5 rebounds, that's solid. I'm not sure what that would be night in and night out on the SEC level. But I think he brings so much to the table. He's a guy I really like. And so I've been talking about him in two-man game. Another player I really like in that is J.P. Pegues, the 6'1" guard at Furman. We know what he did 2 years ago in the NCAA tournament. At this time, knocked off the double-digit seed Furman, knocking off Virginia 4 seed. It was a crazy finish. Furman overcame a 2-possession deficit in the last few seconds. There was a turnover, balls pushed up the court. He launches a deep, I'm talking about a deep three. And this is a guy that plays with a lot of confidence and alpha mentality as a scorer, but he's also a very good facilitator. I absolutely love this guy. And you talk about two-man game, this guy is also brilliant playing that way because his reads are so I mean, they're just outstanding. I watch a lot of film of him, seeing him play in person. And Furman hung around for a while. One of his teammates that's in the portal, Marcus Foster, an explosive scoring guard that did not play against Arkansas in the 97-83 Hogs win. I think that was the first game actually in December for Arkansas, right after the Duke win, and Arkansas won by 14. But Foster, the leading scorer for that team, also in the portal, also contacted by Arkansas, didn't play. But Pegues did, and it wasn't one of his better shooting games. Okay, let's go through his stats first on the season, and I'm going to talk about what he did at Arkansas and what I like about him. 18.4 points per game, 4.8 assists, 4.3 steals, 4.3 rebounds. That's a great stat line for a 6'1 guard. 4.3 rebounds, 1.2 steals per game, 42% field goal shooter, 36.2% from three. That's on a high volume, nearly three makes per game from three for him. So on a high volume of attempts, right around 8 per game, just under. He's shooting 36.2%. For a volume guy, that's great. 87.5% at the free throw line. This checks so many boxes that Eric Musselman likes to see. He wants efficient guys getting the free throw line. And so when I really look at someone's thanking me and appreciating content, thank you. I need to get these on and get closer to it. You know my problems with this. I struggle with it. But this guy to me, 21 points, 6 assists, 2 rebounds, and a steal against the Hogs. Wasn't a great shooting game. If I'm remembering correctly, only made, I think, 4 total field goals, right? I think he took 14 or 15 attempts. Not a percentage night for him. And they had to make adjustments. Again, Foster was out. But 3 of his makes were behind the arc, and he was 10 of 10 at the free throw line. And as I recall, when Furman was hanging around, he just kept making play after play. Either he would find a way to score or get someone else involved. But almost 5 assists per game. And go watch film on him. He's a guy that understands how to play off the ball. Arkansas had so many struggles. Makai Brown-Jones, who I just talked about, also knows how to play off the ball. These guys read situations. Go watch Pegues. I'm telling you, go watch the film on him. He's crafty with the ball. He knows how to play off the ball. He'll backdoor your ass if you stay up tight on him. He'll finish off the catch, off a pass. He gets to spots when plays break down and the play's not working exactly by design. He's one of those guys. Scotty Thurman used to be great at this. Offset to an open spot where he's in the side of line vision of the guy that has the ball, so that he's an option and a valid option because he's so good shooting from 3 and so good at making decisions. And then, so you understand sometimes your offense breaks down. He's a guy that when he's off the ball understands where to go, how to move, and how to make himself a threat, how to make himself open. I love high IQ players. Again, Arkansas's players this past year, ball dominant guys and weren't used to playing as much off the ball and didn't feel comfortable. You saw it all the time. Now, Arkansas's offense got better late in the year. Caleb Battle was a big part of that. Arkansas also started doing a better job of moving off the ball. Better, not great. This guy is one of those guys that's great. When I watch him, it's everything, man. I love Pegues. But on the ball, let's talk about that, because you talk about two-man game. He can read those situations. He knows how to get downhill off of them. He's got craft in his three-point shooting. He's not just a spot-up catch-and-shoot guy. He can create it off the bounce, going left or right. He can shoot it from deep. He's clutch. I talked about the buzzer, effectively a buzzer beater to knock off Virginia in the NCAA tournament. He's a guy that's got a lot of confidence in his three-point game. And then when he gets downhill, when he picks and chooses and decides to drive, he can get all the way to the basket. He understands how to finish that way at 6'1", but he is a sublime passer. He is a very good, he does a great job of reading situations, whether that's two-man game or plays breaking down, and he's just got to go make a play. When you're talking about undersized guards at Arkansas, J.D. Notae had the kind of confidence, and Eric Musselman trusted him with the ball. I wasn't always crazy about his decision-making. Certainly his efficiency shooting from three and at the free throw line isn't what Pegues is. But there is that kind of belief in self that you see in Pegues that we kind of saw in Notae. So they're, size-wise and some of that, that air about themselves is there. this guy's a more efficient player. But those two guys I really like, and I saw, I've seen them in person against the Hogs. I've seen them play during the college basketball season. Going back and watching highlights reaffirms things I think about these guys. These are guys that Arkansas is not only contacted, by the way, but guys that I'm telling you, there's more than just initial contact. There's real, optimism of getting these guys on campus and maybe getting them as part of the program. We'll see what else comes available. I'm telling you, the portal's going to, continue to sprout names. In Arkansas, 40 plus contacts so far. I mean, some of this stuff's going to really start buzzing today as we start a new week. And again, 36 teams are out of the NCAA tournament now. Another guy I got to see against Arkansas, Old Dominion. So if you remember, Arkansas had 2 3-game winning streaks in non-conference play. That was it. That was the best run Arkansas would have all year. Only 1 2-game winning streak in league play. But the first of those 3, the third opponent, the third win there was a home game. It was a tight game. Old Dominion, Arkansas won 86-77, 9-point win. But this guy to me, when you looked at the guards, because it's so early in the season, and at that point, Arkansas is 2-0. And we know the accolades coming in with guys like Devo Davis and Tremont Mark and Caleb Battle. But the guy that I thought for most of the game stood out the most was Chance Jenkins, 6'4" guard. He's really long, got really good length. He feels like a 6'5", 6'6" guy, the way he plays with that length, that plus wingspan. But this past season at Old Dominion, 15.9 points, 3.8 rebounds, 3.8 rebounds, 2.7 assists, just a 40% shooter from the field, but 32.4% from 3, respectable, 72.4% at the free throw line. But what I like about him, this guy's a fearless slasher, and he loves to use the glass. He was getting downhill, and when he couldn't get on a trajectory getting to the rim, if he felt a body or was sort of, funneled or shoehorned away a little bit, he had so many great finishing angles, 8, 10, 12, 14 feet from the basket, driving and going glass, contorting himself and going glass. In transition, a reverse layup where he's fallen down basically and has that length and touch. Some of his stuff, the body type's not the same. But a little bit of his game, and Mason Jones, 6'4", 6'5", this guy 6'4". This guy has a lot more wingspan. They're not the same player, but Mason Jones is one of the best tough bucket getters driving, and he knew how to get those glass angles or get those really off-balance finishes. These aren't the same stylistically, but at the same time, I think about a guy that really could make tough finishes off drives, and this guy was one of them. And I go back and I watch his film against other competition, and what you see is Jenkins constantly using that glass off drives. He's a confident 3-point shooter. He's going to pull it. This guy is an alpha mentality kind of offensive player. And another guy, when you look at his length, his body type, there's a little smaller, shorter version maybe of a Tremont Mark or a Jalen Tate, whose body types are kind of similar. One thing I noticed, and so I mentioned these 3 guys that Arkansas faced this year, by the way, Chance Jenkins against the Hogs, I mentioned it was a 9-point loss, 21 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. He did a little bit of everything, and really at times I thought he was the best player on the court in a game where Arkansas's guards were really built and wings were built up in such a big way coming into the season. And I thought, man, this guy kind of for long stretches here looks like the best one of them all. But he's got a year of eligibility remaining. So everybody I've talked about so far, 6 names I've gotten into, all have 1 more to go. So a lot of experience, proven guys. But the thing I like again about Jenkins is I think he's got a chance. To me, it looks like he could be a plus defender and a guy that another one of those cerebral type players that if Musselman could get in and get into his system, maybe could find some of the success he found with other guys that he brought in. I'm not going to say that he's a DC Toney, that kind of a lockdown guy, but I didn't know that a DC Toney was going to be such a good defender and kind of grew into that under Musselman. So you never know if a guy like Jenkins could do that. But those are 3 players that Arkansas faced this year that really stood out to me. And again, I kind of went through Jenkins a little bit. He also has a pull-up game. I had that in my notes and just skipped over that a second ago. All right, so we're going to move into another battery of players here, guys that have, I'm hearing some things about. 45 minutes in, I'm going to try to get through some of this pretty quickly. Deshane Montgomery, 3 years of eligibility left. Freshman last year at Mount St. Mary's, not the same as St. Mary's out west that plays. This is an East Coast. You got to go east for this one. But Mount St. Mary's had a really good freshman season. 13 points, 3.5 rebounds, 2 assists per game, 1.7 steals. This guy will gamble. He'll jump passing lanes. Savvy guy. 53.8% field goal shooting, 41.2% from three, and over 72% at the free throw line. So as a freshman, this guy had a really, really good season. He's got a plus wingspan. He's a guy that kind of glides. There's a little smoothness. He's a lefty. There's a little smoothness to it. I know he's on Arkansas's radar. I'm tired of finesse. Find me some dogs. Yeah, I think I think the finesse was not just about the physical part. A lot of it was between the ears. And I think some of these guys, even if you look at their build, Jalen Tate was a tough cookie. Lanky, rail thin, wasn't a polished offensive player, was a lead guard, but not a pro point guard, but man, he was facilitator first. There were matchups Arkansas was able to exploit with him. I remember Oral Roberts in the NCAA tournament to get to the Elite Eight. We talk a lot about the famous Devo Davis shot that win it for Arkansas, but Tate was a guy that Arkansas really played on the stretch against a tough ORU team that gave Arkansas fits in both games that year because Arkansas hosted the Golden Eagles in Fayetteville in December non-conference play. But I remember Tate going down and taking Abness down to the woodshed around the basket and scoring. And so he was a tough character, an elite defender in my opinion, or a plus defender anyway. Sometimes he looked elite. Sometimes a little inconsistent because he had some problems with fouling and stuff like that. But a rail thin guy at 6'6". So some of these guys are tough, and some of them are built just right. We went through most of them. Nobody's slide a frame out of the group I've mentioned so far, except for you could say Jenkins is. And then Montgomery, he's again a freshman, 3 years of eligibility. This is interesting to me because everybody I've talked about's got a lot of experience. We'll see if Musman blends any younger players in with a little bit of experience. He'll do that too. We know we brought in Keon Minifield Jr., who had a freshman season, all Pac-12 at Washington 2 years ago, up and down season, missed the first 10 games. Now he's gone to the portal. It's Deshane Montgomery's a bigger player, 6'4" guard at a Mount St. Mary's. He is, beyond just being on the radar. It's someone that I think Arkansas is targeting. I reported this on Friday. I got a source that told me that Terrace Reed Jr., the 6'10" forward center, big-time player coming out of Link Academy. We know Link's one of the strongest independent national schools on the high school level. This guy played with Jordan Walsh there when Jordan was came to Arkansas. Reed was off to Michigan. We know Michigan's had a coaching change. Dusty May's now there. We'll see if there's any that's just been announced coming into the yesterday over the weekend, and we'll see if Reed's a guy that can be pulled back in. I don't know the answer to that, but 6'10" and 9 points, 7.2 rebounds, 1.4 blocks per game, 52% from the field shooting, 52% from the free throw line. But he's a guy I got to watch because he did team at Link Academy with Jordan Walsh, so I got to see him play in person a little bit more on live streams and some of the national stuff that ESPN brought in. And Reed's a guy that can be, he's big. He's not just 6'10". He's big. I forgot to write his weight down, but he's a sturdy guy. He's an active guy. He's a guy that'll step out a little bit and do some stuff facing. But he'll be a guy that's coveted. He is already coveted, but Arkansas is one of the teams that's reached out. So I'm interested in that. Davion Sykes, a 6'6" forward out of Texas State. He's from Duncanville, Texas. He was teammates with Anthony Black. He's been at Texas State. He's got 2 years of eligibility, so he spent the last 2 years at Texas State, but he was a teammate back in high school, from what I'm told. Same program, Duncanville, Texas, kind of the pride of Texas basketball, several years running there. Big-time program. but over 11 points, 7 rebounds per game at Texas State last year at 6'6". So he's one of those guys that, maybe there's some defensive versatility there, but he's been Arkansas's only been in touch with him, but he's communicated with everybody on Arkansas staff, he's told me. So let's see if there's any progress made there. Those are a couple of more names outside of the first group I talked about. When I go into Terrace Reed, Davion Sykes, and Deshane Montgomery out of those three is probably the one to really keep an eye on right now. And then a couple of more names, guys I've just been kind of watching, that when you're talking about the SEC and coaching changes, obviously Jerry Stackhouse out. I just mentioned Terrace Reed Jr. out of Michigan with Juwan Howard out. But with Stackhouse moving on out of Vanderbilt, you got Tyron Lawrence, a guy that's on Arkansas's radar for sure, a guy that's had good games against the Hogs. 6'4" guard, 13.8 points this past season, 5.1 rebounds, 1.5 assists. In a sense, it was a little bit of a down year for him, only because his shooting. He's only 40% from the field this season, and only 27.2% from three. That's 9 percentage points lower than the previous season when he shot 36% from three. So we know Arkansas's had its struggles with 3-point shooters. He had 21 points and 5 rebounds in that big win for Vandy in Fayetteville. Manjon's a guy that really hurt Arkansas in those games. Lubin on the front line with double-doubles. Lawrence name a little bit. Didn't have a good game in the loss for Vandy in the SEC tournament. I think he only finished with 6 points against the Hogs. But in that Fayetteville win, big game for Tyron Lawrence as well. And then a former Vanderbilt player, Malik D. I've been watching him for a while now and really getting into his footage. All Missouri Valley Conference. You talk about a stout mid-major conference, Missouri Valley always is. But a 6'9" forward, 1 year at Vanderbilt, didn't do much there, but 16.9 points per game, 5.8 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 49% from the field, 34.1 from three. And he'll take some threes. He shoots 4 a game. So that's not a misleading stat in terms of volume. That's good efficiency for a 6'9" guy. And he's got, he's solidly built. He's kind of stout. He reminds me a little bit, not exactly, he doesn't have the same kind of floor IQ. He doesn't have the same floor IQ. Now the name's escaping me. The South Carolina floor, BJ Mack. BJ Mack, Arkansas has recruited him in the past by 2 coaching staffs, Mike Anderson and Eric Melsman, but they ended up at South Carolina. And really, you watched him hurt the Hogs from the perimeter, could do work around the basket, and then he finds ways to get to the free throw line. This guy's got a similar build, a little taller, not exactly the same game because Matt can beat you with passes. A little more savvy player, but some of the stuff when you look at the volume from three and the ability to step out, and then he can put it on the deck and drive to spots a little bit. He's got a little craft there for a 6'9" guy. And Mac was kind of that way, he just had ways to figure out ways to beat you. So there's some level when you talk about Mikael Brown-Jones at 6'8" shooting like he does from three. And a guy like Malik Dia, who also is not as good percentage-wise, but still a threat and a good enough percentage. BJ Mack brought some of that last year at 6'7", 6'7", 6'8" for South Carolina. And so not exactly the same player as these guys, but there's enough stuff to look at and say there may be some of that kind of value for an Arkansas Razorback basketball team under Eric Melsman, depending upon how you use them and what kind of roles these guys would be able to carve out. All right, I want to get to some of the in-state. I want to talk in-state for a little bit because in-state recruiting has been the lifeblood of the best Arkansas teams historically. Eddie Sutton, what put Arkansas on the map were the triplets: Sidney Moncrief, Ron Burr Sr., and Marvin Delph. Little Rock, Fort Smith Northside, Conway, respectively, for the triplets. So many great players in the history of the program that came from the state. Many of them played, I mentioned those guys, but many of them played, for Sutton and some of his more prolific guys, U.S. Reed, Andrew Lang. There were other guys from in-state. When you got into Nolan Richardson, everybody knows Corliss, Big Nasty Williamson. That's next to Moncrief, in my opinion. I mean, those are the two names that when you talk about the GOATs of the program, for me it's Moncrief, others it's Corliss Williamson. I'm going to stick with Moncrief, but those two guys, the in-state guys, are to me the first two faces you see on the Mount Rushmore of players, if you had one, for a very storied program. But Nolan Richardson, again, had his share of in-state guys. He did a lot with guys from out of state as well. But when you look at Eric Musselman, the success he's had, Isaiah Joe helped that team get to 20 wins the first year one. Not a guy that Musselman recruited, but he retained. And that was Joe's sophomore season, and it ended up being his last season at Arkansas. But to me, Moses Moody is arguably the most important recruit, not only of the Eric Musselman era, but in a while at Arkansas. I mean, I can go back to Bobby Portis and Daniel Gafford. I left their names out. Both of those guys obviously played for Mike Anderson. Both of those guys were big-time players that were NBA draft picks. Late first round for Portis, early second round for Gafford. Both of them are doing really good things in the NBA. Jalen Williams, we'll talk about him, but starts with Moses Moody, the same class as Jalen Williams, but you got a guy that was projected as a one and done. He was projected as a first round draft pick before he ever stepped foot on campus. That was validated by not only going in the first round, but being a late lottery pick. But 1 point shy of Scotty Thurman's all-time scoring record for a freshman at Arkansas. First team All-SEC, newcomer of the year, freshman of the year. Really close to being SEC player of the year. I think it was really close between him and Herbert Jones. Alabama won the league title outright. Arkansas finished second, a game and a half back. But Moses Moody, the team's leading scorer, top 5 or so in the SEC in scoring when the season ended. Just a big-time player from Central Arkansas. And he was really the guy that was so instrumental. Devo Davis, Arkansan. Jalen Williams, 2 years in the program, back-to-back Elite Eights. Arkansan, early second-round NBA draft pick. KK Robinson, one player out of that 4-player 2020 recruiting class, all from Arkansas, top 35 ranked player. One guy that, at his time at Arkansas, injury-prone, didn't really ever have a role here and moved on. But 3 of the 4, when we were talking Moses Moody, Jalen Williams, Devo Davis, and Moody was the guy that when he jumped on board, you knew that it made it easier for the other ones to make that decision and help build something. So the lifeblood of even Eric Musselman's program is in-state players. I mean, that's been the best of what he's brought in, and he's brought some really good players in out of the portal. Nick Smith Jr., I know things didn't work out as well for that team in 1 year. He was always going to be a one and done. The knee issue dogged him at different times, but, in the summer exhibition play, early part of the year, and so on. And he missed 19 games. But he still had big games. We were just talking about that Greensboro team that beat Arkansas. Greensboro beats Arkansas the previous year, if not for Nick Smith Jr., in one of his first games back, going off for 20-something points, having a big second half, and pushing Arkansas over the finish line in a game it trailed a lot. That was a team that went 8-10 in SEC play and did without Nick Smith Jr. for a while. But he had some big games outside of Greensboro, really helped that Arkansas team. But he was instrumental in recruiting guys like Anthony Black and Jordan Walsh. That don't ever sleep on that fact. So in-state players are important. They have been, in my opinion, the most important pieces to Eric Musselman's program that continues to go and get 4, 5, 6. Last year it was 7 players out of the portal. In-state guys have mattered. The in-state recruiting in Arkansas, I talk to Division I coaches all the time, and they always make a point to tell me, I can put together 2 or 3 states where I put all the best players together from those states, and it's still better in Arkansas. I hear stuff like that all the time. And there's no doubt these upcoming classes, 2025, 2026, Arkansas they whiffed in 2024 in state. But there's not only high major guys, but some of these guys are already taking part in Team USA junior national stuff. Those are elite invitations, by the way. Some of these guys are getting some of the big invites at some of the biggest camps. They play, they've already shown their worth to this point and will continue to do so in spring and summer grassroots. Some of the top players around it. So it's going to be important for the high school part. Now, what are we talking about really right now in spring recruiting? We're talking about the portal. And so then there's that other side of Arkansas recruiting. We've seen Devo Davis go into the portal. 4 years under Musk, great career at Arkansas. There were a few bumps and blemishes along the way, but a great career. That Arkansas doesn't have back-to-back Elite Eights and a Sweet 16 without major contributions from Devo Davis. I don't have to go through the resume. You know that. Layden Blocker, a prized recruit. One and done in Arkansas, but not the way you want to see it. He's in the portal. And I think that I think there was an opportunity there to help him develop, but also get his toughness. For a team that lacked it, he was the toughest guy last year, but let's move on. He's in the portal. Little Rock guy. Devo Davis, Central Arkansas guy, Jacksonville. Joseph Pinion out of Morrilton. Got more, had more significant run as a freshman in a couple of games. Missouri and Ole Miss saved Arkansas's butt in those games because of the dynamics he brought from the perimeter and actual production, double-figure scoring, turned those games around. Not as much this year. In the portal. So you've got the 3 Arkansans out of there. Okay, so what's the big deal? You want to get the best players available. You're not going to have to be, you don't need to be hamstrung just because you're the University of Arkansas to Arkansas players. But I just went through the history. Arkansas's most relevant teams in seasons have been just littered with their top players being from the state. And there's more to come. There's more of it. It's out there now. And so you got players going in the portal from the state. Okay. We saw it last year. Darian Ford was one of the departures. We know Nick Smith Jr. went in the draft, so that's different. First round draft pick. But how then could Arkansas factor into the portal other than sending players out? And that's kind of some of the names I want to go through. I wanted to kind of get on that soapbox a little bit because I want fans to remember there are going to be times when you don't get players from in-state. Arkansas's missed on some, even recently. Khalil Ware, who's projected as a first-round pick. It's taken him a year more than Nick Smith. He went to Oregon, finished at Indiana, finished the season strong. Projections for first round, maybe lottery. We'll see with him. 7-footer, guy covered a lot. When he was only 6'7" in 8th grade, I said that guy's got a chance to be a 5-star someday. I'm pretty good at this stuff and seeing this stuff. When he didn't have the greatest motor at that time, it's something he was still dealing with going into college, by the way, the consistent motor. And he was frail, 6'7", just wiry, thin, but he had some face-up skill, and he was really good in tight spaces, getting to the rim. And his motor was interesting to me in tight spaces because he was able to navigate bodies and get tip-ins, put-back dunks, things like that. I'm like, man, this guy, if he continues to grow, get stronger, and understand what it takes to be a really good player, he's not only a high major player, maybe got some 5-star in his blood. That's how it played out. All right, but anyway, the point is that Arkansas puts out a lot of really good players, NBA-level players. And Arkansas, as a program lately, has been putting its share of NBA players in. And some of these guys now, Ricky Council IV out of the portal from Wichita State, Stanley Amudi, who came, really had, I think, probably one of the more underrated seasons for one of Eric Melsman's transfer guys. And I've talked about that in the past, but now he's not only worked himself out of a 2-way deal into a contract, a 2-year deal now with the Pistons, but a guy that when he gets opportunities, has started a few games here late on a bad team. But he's showing that he may stick around in the NBA. So the portal recruiting is important. You want to make the pitches, but how does Arkansas, because I've gone through a lot of names that don't have Arkansas ties other than some that played against the Hogs. And what I would say is there's some names here that Arkansas has been in touch with, and then I'm going to circle back to a guy that might be getting into the portal soon, fairly soon. We'll see. I don't know that for a fact, but I think he just might. But some that I've reported on, Cameron Hunter, 6'3" guard out of Bryant, has already played 2 seasons at UCA, all freshman team 3 years ago, 2 seasons ago, 3rd team All Atlantic Sun at UCA, led the team in scoring that year with 16 points, but a bulky, strong lead guard, again, 6'3", 6'2", 6'3", really strong guy, can play some bully ball, willing facilitator, and is one of those kind of hard-nosed players that are really determined to win each possession at both ends. He's one of those guys. I like Cameron Hunter. He took an unofficial visit a year ago to Arkansas when he got in the portal. He ended up committing to Butler, never went to Butler, backed out of that, stayed at UCA, but got injured a foot in October in a close scrimmage and did not play at all this past season. The foot's healed, but he didn't play, still 2 years remaining eligibility. I reported this already, but had Ronnie Brewer Jr., Arkansas assistant coach and recruiting coordinator, has been in touch with him and his family, and then had a long conversation with Cam over the weekend. We'll see if Eric Melsman's next to reach out to him. Colin Milton, a young man that when he played at Conway, I did like his game, but he's a guy that's got 1 more year of eligibility. I mentioned Hunter with 2, but Milton's a 6'4" guard. Arkansas Pine Bluff this past season, 17 points in the SWAC, 17 points per game, 4.2 assists, 3.8 rebounds, 2.2 steals. and a 38.7% shooter from three. That's what I remember him from high school. He's a guy that could shoot the three, had some savvy and some craft and getting into his mid-range stuff. And at 6'4", so here's a guy that's at Arkansas Pine Bluff. He's a guy that I know Arkansas has not only contacted, has had some interest in. I've got a source that tells me that Arkansas could be amongst his Final Four schools. We'll see how Arkansas on that side of it's serious about that, because I don't have feedback on that part of it. Talon Peter, another player that I got to cover here in Arkansas from Russellville High School, stayed in Russellville at Arkansas Tech. He too has one more year to go, but a 6'4" wing. This guy is very athletic, explosive, slasher, but he's improved. He's improved everywhere when you look at his overall game. But 21.4 points per game, 6.4 rebounds last season, 2.5 assists per game. I think he was player of the year in his conference. I think that's right. First team all league for sure. But Talon Peters, a guy that Arkansas has been in touch with, as has Oklahoma and some other high majors. By the way, there are high major schools talking to all of these Arkansans who are either playing Division I in state somewhere or out of state. That's the out of state. I've mentioned the three I just mentioned played in state, but the one I'm about to get to is played out of state this past season. He is not in the portal yet. I think he might go in there. And I was talking about already, I wanted to have a segue, and that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about Kalel Ware, so I threw that in there. But Kalel Ware, Nick Smith Jr., they were both McDonald's All-American on that North Little Rock team that won the state title. Both McDonald's All-Americans, both 5 stars, both projected as potential one-and-dones, or likely. We know Nick Smith Jr. was. Ware's going to be a 2-and-done. But the third wheel on a very good team was Corey Washington. And sometimes he was the first wheel. I covered a lot of their games. Just an extraordinary athlete at 6'6", Corey Washington. Went to St. Peter's. This is a really good Division I program. Knocked off Kentucky in the NCAA tournament. What was it, 3 years ago in the first round? We know Big Blue fell again in the first round to Oakland this year. Boy, Calipari's really been underachieving, hasn't he? But Corey Washington didn't have a great game in the first round against Tennessee. Tennessee is the best team from the SEC. They were in the regular season. They were ranked that way, and now they're off to the Sweet 16. Only 2 SEC teams out of the 8. A really bad NCAA tournament when you look at it collectively for 8 teams. 5 of those bounced into double-digit seeds, a lot of them early, some by double-digit margin losses. But Tennessee and Alabama get to the Sweet 16, and Tennessee destroyed St. Peter's. Corey Washington did not have a great game, but 6'6", athletic. You talk about toughness and a will to win plays. That's what I always notice about Corey Washington. Whatever it took, but that athleticism, and you were always wondering where's the skill coming, because he's a high major guy. The more he puts together skills, you could see there's a high major in him. Well, this past season, 15.9 points, 6.3 rebounds, 1.2 steals for an NCAA tournament team in St. Peter's. 45.5% from the field. Okay, that's fine. Just over 30% from three, just under 31%, 30.8, 77.3% at the foul line. When I watched him in high school, as good as he was, free throw shooting was very inconsistent. And so in 2 years, in his three-point shooting, very, very streaky. I don't know if he averaged, a little over 3 out of 10, but memory would serve, probably not that good. But this is a guy that has continued to add bricks to his wall. When you put up a wall as a player and say, this is who I am, and you want people to notice you, you have to do these things. And you have to. So he's not in the portal. I'm talking about a guy who's not in the portal. I think he might go in there, and I think Arkansas might be a player and have some level of interest. Arkansas was looking at him when the Hogs were bringing in Nick Smith, and they did take a few looks at him. And I was there at some practices and games when Arkansas coaches were there, not only to see Nick, but they really were keeping an eye on Corey. And so let's see if Arkansas circles back on him if he gets in the portal. I have a feeling he might, but we'll see. You just never know with some of these things. All right, we're an hour and 10 minutes in. I really want to. So I've gone through 15 names today. I've actually gone through 15 total. There's a lot more. Again, Arkansas's had contact with over 40. There's probably a handful or more of guys I think Arkansas is really serious about. Maybe 5 to 8 more that I haven't mentioned. and won't for a little bit. I'm going to wait on that for various reasons. Some I've been asked to, but we will get into some more of that as we move on. I really wanted to get through the hard work that this staff is putting in, because it's not just about Eric Musselman, and we're going to talk a little bit about the coaching stuff. But his decision is his. When we get into that, we'll talk about it. But everybody below him is, their decisions and what they're doing would be a domino after, if the first domino were something were to happen there, and so they would be after that. And so you're not talking about just Eric Musselman working the portal like he always does. I mean, smartly and aggressively and casting a wide net. He's the Arkansas Razorback head coach, and he's working like he always has. And for anyone to think with some of this other stuff going on, I know I'm kind of dipping my toe back into it without really getting into it. I'm going to. The first part of it is you do what you do as a coach. And he's at Arkansas. He's the head coach at Arkansas, and he's recruiting like he always does. And his staff, everyone below that, is putting in that kind of effort and that kind of work. This is a staff that some guys go out on the road and some stay back, and they shuffle some of that up. But you're already during portal season. Arkansas season came to an end just a week ago Thursday. So what, 10 days or so ago, they're already on the road on this portal stuff. They're already doing the virtual meetings, and they have a system for doing that, and they're adhering to that. So there's not a hiccup there. And so you have to acknowledge, to me, that's the most important thing for us to talk about today. That's why I've spent over an hour on it. But I'm very impressed with what Arkansas has done as a staff in terms of recruiting. The level of players I've talked about, the guys that they're after. We'll see how some of this shakes out. We're going to see, again, more names come in because the portal continues. We're so used to Arkansas going through the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, and we know when they've traveled to various places for their regions, they're still recruiting and doing FaceTimes and all that. The timing was moved up on some of this stuff and the ability to go out on the road and do some of that stuff because Arkansas didn't have a postseason beyond the SEC tournament. So it was bumped up a couple of weeks. So that means as teams that are in the tournament, more players come out. It's a different trajectory in some ways for this staff. Who do they wait on? What more do they need to see? Because there's a lot of names out here, and I've reported on over 40 they've contacted. There's more than that, because some of the names I know about that I haven't reported on or talked about today aren't even out there yet. And there's more than that even. So, we'll see what they do. Last year, again, they spun off 5 backcourt players in a span of 2 weeks, early April to mid-April, and that was Keon Minifield Jr., Tremont Mark, Caleb Battle, L. Ellis, and Jeremiah Davenport. All that happened within a 2-week span. So we'll see what the approach is this time around. Again, they've got a visitor coming in Josh Cohen, maybe in the next 24 hours or so, as soon as that. But so let's we've gone through the Arkansas stuff, talking about this staff and how hard it's working on the recruiting trail. I think that's very important to acknowledge and to salute. And so, again, I don't want to get fixated on reporting on certain things that I know are controversial, that I know, can be upsetting to fans, especially after the success Arkansas's had. Because when you look at what Eric Musselman's done at Arkansas, he should be on no hot seat. He is on no hot seat, certainly not based on results and what he's brought to the table in so many things he's done. Whether it's, social media branding and then backing it up with results, having big recruiting wins, having big wins on the court. And then the postseason. I mean, 2 SEC teams at the Sweet 16, as good as Nate Oates and Alabama have been winning the SEC or finishing at the top of that league consistently, the Sweet 16, that's, I think, that's as far as they've gone. They're there again. We'll see. They're able to knock off the 1 seed North Carolina, that I think is a good matchup for Alabama, actually. I think it's a very good matchup. That game could turn into a track meet. And so I don't know who's going to win that, but maybe Oates gets Bama finally to an Elite 8. Eric Musselman's done it twice, and then follow it up with the Sweet 16. Don't sleep on that. I talked about the success with Arkansas kids. Let's talk about the transfer portal again. Justin Smith, Jalen Tate, J.D. Notae, Stanley Amudi, Odis Tony, Ricky Council IV. Those are the headliners. Trevor Brazile was a guy thought to be, injuries have slowed him. But another big-time player coming out of there. Makai Mitchell, who ended up doing some good stuff for Arkansas and was certainly a big part of a team that went to a Sweet 16 a year ago. And so the portal's been good to Arkansas as well. And so that's why it is important for the staff to work like it does this time of year. And so again, some of the optics are a little different because of how Arkansas season ended and what the season was. It does probably impact some of the approach in the portal, but the work ethic is the same, and that's the key. And so I wanted to really highlight that first. All right. So I talked myself again, HogvilleNet, YouTube Live. I called it, what did I title this today? I can't even remember now. The breakfast buffet, Hoop Hogs buffet for breakfast, however you want to phrase it. I got on here early. And the main reason I'm doing that is because there's going to be a lot of news coming out today. It's already 8:20. I might be missing stuff. I could have missed a commitment by now. There may be something out there. And I appreciate some of the comments. I haven't gotten to them today. Some of them have scrolled by and I wasn't able to really get to them, but I've seen a few. But let's get in now. Let's talk a little bit. Make sure I covered my bullets. And I have. Let's talk a little bit about the coaching thing, because this has been a complex situation in terms of how I've reported it. There have been sources, a lot that I've had going way back. I'm talking months that that convinced me that Eric Musselman was interested in moving on. It wasn't just about leverage. He's interested in moving on. I sat on the names of the schools because my sources asked me to. Some of that stuff was already out there before I started even talking about it, including names of schools. Just a week ago, Sunday, not this Sunday, but on the 17th on Pig Trail Nation, I finally mentioned that Louisville was front and center in terms of schools that Musselman would leave Arkansas for, based on what sources told me. I firmly stand behind that, okay? I haven't trickled out any other names of schools. A lot of them have been put out there. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that today. But you have to understand something else. You're here in Louisville. Not only did you hear it from me just a week ago, but for weeks before that, I was talking about, without naming schools, that not only have I been talking about he's been looking elsewhere, but that some of that information had even come weeks before I started talking about that much, which means it's been out there for a while, which means it's not real time. Some of the reporting, when you look at national guys, are bringing Musselman's name up for Louisville in the last couple of weeks. One of those was Gary Parrish on a podcast. CBS Sports, one of their main basketball analysts, has been for years, effectively said what I did. He started talking about it, and he mentioned Louisville, and he said, I've known about this for a while. Other sources or reporting came out before even I did with it, without mentioning Louisville, but just the fact that he was looking. Then I mentioned Louisville on March 17th. The point of saying all that is some of that stuff's not in real time. And I have consistently said that Eric Musselman has, there are opportunities out there that he's open to and interested in. By my count, from my source information, a flood of it was Louisville, and then there's multiples for other schools, and there's a total of about 8 to 10. I've only mentioned Louisville. That's the only one I've come out with. Yesterday on HogvilleNET, I did mention, someone asked me about Musselman to Florida Atlantic. I don't know if that was a joke or not, but that is actually one of the schools that more than one source told me had some level of interest in. It was serious interest, not just that wasn't a part, was a joke. You have to understand there would be a priority list of the kind of jobs that a coach like Eric Musselman might entertain. It surprised me. This was in my reporting, though, when I wasn't specifically naming names of schools, that there were some mid-majors and other programs that I did not consider to be lateral moves or even a better job, let alone a lateral move, that Musselman was interested in. I'm now qualifying that with one other school name, and that was Florida Atlantic. And look, Dusty May, we knew that's a name that's been out there, is going to be one of the top coaching targets out of the mid-major level. He just took the job at Michigan. Some thought it would be Louisville. I've been hearing for a while that Musselman is not in the top pecking order for Louisville. But he wasn't at Arkansas either. He was, in my opinion, the third choice there. Kelvin Sampson, Greg Marshall ahead of him, Eric Musselman. It ended up being a great hire. Sometimes it works that way. So that's my take on that. And that's why I'm not comfortable making any predictions that he stays or goes. All I've really reported as solid is that from the multiple sources for weeks and months is that he's looking with real interest to leave, not just to use his leverage. Now, things are fluid. Things can change in terms of his determinations. One of the things I also said is some of these jobs he might have interest in because he's not in a hot seat. We don't know exactly how many he'd get really serious about, but the kind of season Arkansas had may remove him, may knock him down the pecking order of preferred choices for some of these schools. And according to my source information, it's not just about the record. Some of the other stuff, Arkansas had some other stuff going on this past year. It's pretty obvious. And it ran through the SEC tournament, and you had a player that stayed back for academic reasons. You had that with another player. You had Devo leave the team for a few games. You had another player that was indefinitely suspended under the radar. I talked about it, but it never saw the light of day, and no games were missed. But there was just a lot of stuff. So when you're having a bad year like that, it can change the dynamics. And so if you're putting feelers out early that you have interest in certain things, based on a perception you're going to have another good year because you've had 3 good years, and it just doesn't play out that way. I think along the way, if you do have feelers about leaving, it may add some things to your list as a coach that you might not have thought you would be needing to look at, because you don't know how it's going to end. I mean, Arkansas could have had an implosion. It didn't. It didn't. They weren't a good team. They didn't beat good teams. The Hogs didn't down the stretch, but they didn't completely tank. They didn't have a kind of season that Missouri did when you look at 0-18. I mean, Arkansas did have its share of lumps and bad losses, but Arkansas was more competitive, not to a point where it was, again, beating good teams, but still more competitive. I guess we could say sweeping A&M in league play was, it was a quad 1 win on the road, and you could say, well, that was a fairly good opponent. Well, the way the season played out for A&M, that's a good argument. I mean, the Aggies had to win their last 2 games in league play, the final week of SEC regular season, to get to 500 in league play, 9-9. Had a lot of quad 1 wins on their resume, but a lot of quad 3 losses, including Arkansas. And then the Aggies beat Kentucky in the SEC tournament, won their first round game in the NCAA tournament, and then took the number 1 seed Houston to overtime. So it ended up being an Aggie team that looked more like the team that was projected in the top 2 in preseason, along with Tennessee and Arkansas projected 3rd. Arkansas was nowhere near that kind of a team. But having said all that, I do think dynamics play into your attractiveness as a candidate. And so, SMU is a school that popped up with Musselman on his radar, and you saw national reporters put that out there and get into that. I was actually having conversation with a coach, a Division I assistant coach, who was talking to me that he was hearing that maybe Musselman would be in play at SMU when those tweets started coming out. I was actually having those conversations. As soon as I saw the first tweet from Goodman, I don't know if it was the first one. I know Jeff Berzello at ESPN may have done something even before that, but the one I saw was Goodman during that conversation. And I just put a checkpoint, things that might be reasons that Muss would leave. And I had a question mark, what do you consider? So I didn't have any source information going into that, except in real time as it was happening, that maybe he would be a candidate that SMU would be interested in. And, the word is that Musselman's telling people around him and his inner circle and around that he's not interested in that. That's, I'll put that out there, that I've heard that. But I do know for a fact that this is a guy that has had interest in moving on, not just about leverage. Arkansas's NIL is something that's been a little tricky of late from sources on, different angles of this, not just, it's different angles and perspective of people who had direct impact from it. So there's value there in some of that information. Does that play into, obviously, what Musselman's calculations are? And then if you do have a coaching change later, how does that impact you luring a coach in? There's so many things. Musselman's buyout's not great. One thing I haven't even said yet is a lot of these SEC teams with the top tier coaches have already announced, extensions and increased buyouts and things like that. Musselman's buyout's $1 million. I think after his, at some point it goes down to 750,000. So there's an opportunity there if he's, locked in and both sides, the U of A and Musselman, and the athletic department, Hunter Yurchek, see him as the future of the program, that you get something done like that. It may be that one or both parties wants it open-ended and left like it is for now. I mean, those are questions you have to ask. You're not making speculations and drawing 100% absolute conclusions by them. This is some of the things when I'm seeing some of the posters on HogvilleNET, some of it on social media. If you report something, it becomes an agenda. It's agenda driven, in that you're trying to force an issue that's not there, instead of it's up for the reader to determine what it means. What does this mean? This is a set of information coming from sources. If I say that he's looking for jobs, I'm not also saying he's gone. I don't know that. I've said repeatedly, I don't know if he's going to be here or not. And I've talked about some of the factors that'll play into that. I've talked about how a bad season could eliminate some of the preferred options for him, which would affect that. I don't know the outcome any more than Joe Blow does on that. What I do know, based on what sources are telling me, I do know what that information is, and it's enough for me to believe he's been looking for other opportunities. I think Louisville, based on the stuff I was getting, is a long shot. But again, he was the third choice at Arkansas, and weird things happen once those dominoes start to fall. Teams go after certain names and they don't land. I've got a source that tells me that Louisville has been telling me for 6 weeks to 8 weeks, maybe 2 months, that it's just not going to happen now. It's just that's not going to happen. Yet some of the reporting links into it recently. So based on some of the source stuff I've got, it's not real time, some of this stuff. And I certainly didn't bring up the Louisville name in real time. I didn't bring it up till March 17th. So that does add to confusion a little bit. I'm trying my best to parse it out. It's kind of hard because I have to backtrack in time when I actually start hearing things, when I started, then later, much later, when Arkansas was shot out of the water for an at-large bid, is about the time I started talking about it. So I sat on it for a while, didn't want that to be any kind of a attention getter. And we'll see, because I have no idea what else may come open for Musselman that he would like. I do think if it's something he likes, he's gone. I believe that. And I believe that might, I'm speculating on this, I don't know, but this is how it works a lot. So it might be why we haven't had any kind of strong language about staying in place publicly. He doesn't have to run out and do that. He doesn't have to run out and do that. An extension certainly takes care of that. And that's not just words, that's actually actions. And the extensions are only as strong, the teeth are only as tough as the buyout being increased. I mean, if you announce an extension and you keep the buyout low, so we haven't heard anything on that. Doesn't mean we won't. We might today. They may have put something out while I'm on here and I don't even know it, because I've got to check on stuff when I get off here. I've been on here about an hour and a half. So we went extra long today. This is maybe as long as I've gone on one of these. But I did want to talk a little bit about that. It doesn't clear up any confusion because none of us knows what the next plays are going to be, in the coaching carousel. And dominoes have started to fall. There'll be more of them as teams, finish their seasons in the NCAA tournament. And some programs are watching to see how some coaches are performing, or maybe they're waiting on that coach's team season to end still. So you always understand that it's really still kind of early. And so I think Musselman will be in play. His name could appear again, but the SMU thing, came out right before the weekend. And, that's not one, again, I think it was a bit of a surprise for a lot of people that only 2 years in, Rob Lanier was let go. Now he's going to be at Rice. A source told me early yesterday that look for him to go to Rice. And then later in the evening is when it was announced and some of the projections were coming out that he might be the target. So I actually got some source info that turned out to be absolutely correct on that, an actual coaching change. And it was a job that I was told that Josh Pastner really liked, the former Memphis and Georgia Tech coach. But at any rate, these are how, some of these dominoes won't affect a guy like Musselman, some might. But I think it's important to remember, as long as he's at Arkansas, he's going to do what he does. Coaches can do more than one thing at a time. Eric Musselman's one of the best I've seen at it, of compartmentalizing his time, and he's a grinder. He's a guy with a lot of energy. And so when you hear some of these things, I think some fans get this notion that, well, he's not doing his job if he's looking elsewhere. That's not necessarily true. He's got to do his job. He's got to do that. And believe me, if he were to make a change, then the work he's already put in, I guess, would benefit him somehow on the next level. Nobody wants to hear that, but I mean, you don't stop working. Most people in the job market, they don't stop working their job when they're looking elsewhere. So maybe some do, but at that level, with so many eyes on what's going on, and this is not a typical job either. You got a fan base, that's paying attention to what you're doing, especially after a down year. And Eric Musselman's work ethic would never question that. And so nothing surprises me right now. Nothing surprises me that Eric Musselman's name has been out there for a while. National guys know it, man. They're putting it out there. I haven't talked to one of them. I've had no correspondence with any of those. Some people are accusing me of starting something and the national guys picking up on it. I found that wild. Was seeing that on Hogville. I've seen it, on social media, a couple of places. Absolutely not true. I'm not circling around with a bunch of reporters gossiping. There is one reporter, a single reporter that I've talked to, probably had a couple of conversations, who also has their own sources with coaching contacts in college basketball. That's it. And their information is very, very similar to mine, coming from different places than mine. So, that's, I'm trying to address some things because I am going to post this HogvilleNet YouTube live to hogville.net when I'm finished with it. It's an hour and a half of me really getting into a lot today. Because I want people to understand that there's just a lot of misinformation. When I've said for a while that I'm only slightly more than 50-50 that Musselman would leave, it's because when someone's efforting it, and there's a host of schools out there which could be argued as a move up, argued as a lateral move, or maybe even not a lateral move, and it's just continuous incoming. You're thinking, man, this is someone that is genuinely at a point where there's different things they're considering that would surprise folks. It surprises me. I mean, you're not going to make, if you were, let's say Florida Atlantic was something he was serious about, you're not going to make what you're making at Arkansas. Dusty May, who's the hottest name in coaching right now and just took the Michigan job, is not making as much as Eric Musselman at Michigan. He shouldn't, but he got a raise from Florida, from what he was making at Florida Atlantic. So come on. I mean, so I don't, and I'm not saying he was, that's something he's locked into. I don't want to do that. But what I'm saying is that if a coach is looking and looking that much and for that long, there's something to it. And so dynamics can change. I think the season Arkansas had, again, I'm going to repeat this as I wrap this up. I think it's impacted his prospects. And I think most of the stuff I'm getting, he's not top 1 or 2 on a lot of these, and some of them not top 5. And so we'll just, again, there'll never be any acknowledgement coming from his camp, the athletic department, not privately, not on the record. There'll be no acknowledgement that any of this is true, but it is. Doesn't mean he's leaving. No idea what he's going to do. Very well may be locked in for a 6th year at Arkansas. And the success he's had, I think that's a win for the Arkansas Razorbacks program. Nobody's wishing Eric, and there's always a friend, or there's always certain people, but I'm not seeing that many people saying move on. There are a lot of people that look at one bad season and they have knee-jerk reactions and they live in that moment and say some things. But if you really sit back and look at the full body of work and what it's been, he's been a hell of a coach for the Arkansas Razorbacks. And outside of Nolan Richardson and Eddie Sutton, 2 Hall of Famers, he's actually done some things that mirror some of the stuff those guys did. They were here longer. He's only been here 5 years. And so, let's see how this plays out. But I did want to spend some time on the coaching stuff. It doesn't make it any more clear because we don't know what's going to happen. But I wanted to separate some things because for the longest, all I was talking about that he was looking, I didn't mention any school names. And I probably did a poor job of explaining, look, what I'm telling you is kind of old. It's been out there for a while. I did say that, but I didn't then connect the dot to, so understand, because it's not necessarily real time right now, some of these dynamics may be a little different than when he started putting some of these feelers out. Not only different for him from his perspective, but how some of these schools view him. And so when you're starting to finally hear information later on, it seems so recent and it seems so present, when a lot of it's really kind of honestly stale, some of it. Not that it's any less true, but the dynamics are a little bit different. All right. I don't know if I made that more confusing or not. I tried to deal with it. Maybe I should have had more coffee before I went after that one. I do have a little water here by my side, but I'm going to wrap things up. I want to thank you again for joining me on HogvilleNet YouTube Live, going through the portal recruiting, the Arkansas dynamic, players leaving that are in-state players Arkansas might be looking at out of the portal who are in-state guys, talking a little bit about the coaching stuff. We'll see what happens there. But I can tell you the main focus I had today was Eric Musselman, his coaching staff, and the efforts they're putting in the recruiting portal. I'm impressed by it. They're doing the work like they always do, and they're Arkansas Razorback representatives. It's about the Arkansas Razorbacks there. And so salute to that. And I also, once again, want to thank my sponsors, Jose's Bar and Grill in Town. And if you haven't done it yet, download that Autograph app, download it. We know Arkansas is your favorite team. Select that. It's a lot of content from a lot of different providers at the touch, one or two clicks away there. So it's easy to get to. But I'm impressed with it. I've really enjoyed using that app. I think it's really neat, and I'm glad that Hogville's a part of it. So you can find all of Arkansas, all of Hogville's 100% free content covering the Arkansas Razorbacks on Autograph. All right, so I'm going to sign off. Until next time, see you then.